with Poetry Earthlings, reading poetry as we read poetry about September, written by poets from all over the world. So I have with me Clarita, who goes by the username A Curious Mindscape, who is also a beautiful poet and an artist, and she, takes inspiration from nature for her work, whether it's art and poetry and other kinds of writing as well. And she's mostly centered towards conservation and nature awareness. And so it's only my honor to have somebody like her join me today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me and making me a part of this. And I have a little poem to share. It's not really about September, but it was written last year, somewhere around the same time as September. So it has all the nature feels of India and how September really feels like in a forest in India. So this is how it goes like. There's a lingering feeling in this sheltered world. The air has a bite to it, and the forest sings a song as old as time, when the giants were but mere saplings, and humans built fortresses only to be conquered by vines. Who would have thought that a land half forgotten called to my thirsty soul, plastering fractures with sublime happiness, forging memories never to be forgotten, teaching me the wonders of nature.
That's beautiful. I hope it's of value to you as we read poetry written for September the month, nature poems especially written for September, and how the month makes a poet feel, or how the month is colored in a person's part of the planets. To experience that via poetry is something else. So I'll be reading a poet called A Poet's Whispers. September brings energy, not wilted by the heat, excitement fluttering within, warming hands on cocoa by candlelight, cozy blankets covering tepid feet, leaves saying their goodbyes to summer trees, nights drawing closer with ease, impatience and of browns, oranges, yellows, and darkened greens to replace summer's golden sands and azure seas. A cozy warm piece where the poet is talking about like how the transition especially, and the best thing about September, which I also as feel, is how the month is neither summer nor really autumn, like it's somewhere in between, like a very interesting month, and hence such a fertile ground to write poetry about.
So I'll be reading a poem by Thoughts and Poetic Forms. This is the person's account.
Yeah.
And here it goes. Harvest moon of September. Beams of light longer. Myth, not all tales. I lived not in those times. Recreating the days of yours where people joined in celebrations. Somewhere in the Middle Ages, I visualized the lost times. Come September, a changing course. Seven in name and the ninth month. Powers of manifestation lustrous. I envisioned living in the times. So like I really like the way she has used words to, kind of explain the month and all over the ages. So you actually go back to this really olden times where there were celebrations coming in right around this month because it was the shift from spring and summer into winter. And olden times there were like so many celebrations happening. And there's so many tales that are wrapped around September, so many myths that come in right before the winter or right when the summer and the spring is ending. And it's kind of really beautiful to tie into the setting of like the old stories and the connections that we have with the month and with the changes in nature itself during this singular month. It acts like kind of like this little bit of gap period between a lot of changes that are taking place all around us in the environment. So I really loved how the poet actually put these things and these feelings into words.
And also, like, one thing that she mentioned was the harvest moon. So like something that September has, like every year, like the full moon of September is known as the harvest moon, and she's talking about the energy of the moon and how it helps in manifestations, and she's talking about illumination, the moon's energy. And I remember, like, with Poetry Earthlings, we also have this prompt called "The Moon is a Poet," and have been privileged to really experience, like, the funniest, like the most interesting part about the moon, because because she mentioned the harvest moon, I had to make this comment, was that it's the same moon, right, for everybody on this planet, and it's the most basic thing. But to have so many different interpretations, so much poetry, like the abundance of poetry that the moon inspires, that is really like something I have found, like with the while hosting the prompt, the moon is a poet, is something that I have, like, I felt enamored by. I'll be reading this poem on September, written by Loredana underscore poetry. Loredana is actually from New Zealand, and they have, like, it's winter there, like they'll be having spring now. So I'll read. It says the first green of September because it's spring. So when the first green of September winks, to the trembling birds cheer. When the naive bud of a tulip blinks, do the bees greedily appear. Some of us welcome September, whose touch is tender and clear, while others wait for December, whose passion they prize more dear. So it's written from a southern hemisphere point of view, the first green of September, and then she's looking at December as the peak summer. So it's such an interesting, again, like a month which is so different, again, in so, like, it's so differently colored in different parts of the world. That's the best thing about poetry, and to look at it from the poet's point of view, like, you can just turn look at as an ordinary situation and add so much texture and value to it, like, enhances the life experience.
That's absolutely true. Like, as soon as I did not know that like it would be proper spring in the southern hemisphere during this time, and to realize that people in different parts of the world actually look at it and experience this particular month so differently and have different nature things attached to it is absolutely brilliant. Okay, then I'll be reading a poem by Story Wrecked. Honeyed hope on autumn leaves, sunshine with remnant summer heat, blowing cold with winter's cold wind, not yet here, sometime left still, for goosebumps on skin, this, a festival of seasons, a sombre mourning for our earth ancestors, the yearly descent of heavenly visitors, goddesses bringing blessings amidst dark clouds of grief, their idols sculpted with artisanal duty, adorned with gems of September beauty. So, like in this, like you said, the initial was cold and cozy, and then we went into a proper summer hit, and then now we are back again to the whole northern hemisphere. It's autumn. It's the changes are happening from summer to like autumn, and there's a change in the heat. There's this lingering feeling, and winter is slowly creeping in on us, and you're starting to have that whole mental preparation of like, oh yeah, it's going to be winter in a couple of months. And at the same time, we come back again to this whole feeling of festivals and celebrations that the month of September is entirely marked with. And something that I really like that she called upon was how goddesses bring their blessings, where there's so many cultures all around the world that celebrate this particular month for like varied reasons.
Like, it also gives a glimpse of not just nature but also culture, like you said, because nature and culture are so, like, intertwined. I'll be reading the next poem, and this is by a poet called Shell underscore poet, Shell poet, who wrote this poem for September. And I'll read. September aches, for I long to love the mornings crisp to come and falling colors, those moments, chin tilted up towards the dwindling sun, my heart growing with gratitude. But soon there will be grey, dark nights and endless days of drizzle, and a kind of cold that is never cozy, making bones brittle, hopes of hibernation through even song, scattering seeds for the lonely robin. So this poem it starts in a very warm, beautiful, like a heart is growing with gratitude, because she's talking about crisp mornings, falling colors, the falling leaves and falling colors, beautiful metaphor, and the dwindling sun. But again, she also has this tinge of sadness, because very soon this will pass, and this will after summer, like it'll give there will be winter, the gray of winter will be there, and the lonely robin, that robin will be lonely. She won't be singing the summer song, and you know Yeah, so and hopes of hibernation through even song, a beautiful line.
I'm gonna read a poem now by Autumnal Faye, if I
Yeah,
said it right. Okay. Uh,
fire. I think it's autumnal fire. You know, right?
Fire. Yes.
Michelle. Yeah.
My September welcomes the harvest, bringing bushels of apples and wanders the overgrown fields with cornflower blue skies. My September loves summer with an obvious crush and holds on a little too long, blushing under the attention and turning the leaves red. My September, fickle and eager, has a wandering eye and flirts with fall, ready to enjoy the crisp, cool evenings in the warmth of a lover's arms. I I gotta say I especially love the middle paragraph where she talks about her love, September's love for summer and how September just it's clinging to the edge of summer and being like, yeah, no, do not let go. I still want that little bit of heat, that little bit of summeriness that is happening. And I really like the way that she actually played along with it. And something I could actually see was I could actually picture seeing bushels of apples and cornflower blue skies in the air. And this is kind of a representative of like what September naturally occurs and how it looks like. It's always this tug of war between like keeping summer a little bit longer, but also at the same time flirting a bit with winter and like slowly letting winter come in. And it's just slowly building up this kind of momentum into you getting settled into winter, which is something that is really important for us and for nature as well. We got to slowly slide into this whole drastic change from something summery to cold winters, and September is one of the months that does just that beautifully.
Exactly. And such a, I remember reading this poem and it has such a, apart from the nature bit, which is beautifully described, they had a very human relationship and human interaction, there. Like the intricacies of a human relationship and how, like the flirtation she mentions. That's so beautifully articulated, the personification. Yeah, I think I'll go to the next poem, which is written by Corina B. So I'll read. And Corina's birthday is actually in September, and she mentioned this in her poem, saying that she wrote this for her birthday month. So and she actually wrote this poem after the song September by Fiona Apple. So and it's in reference to the song. I'll read. Pale September, gentle as the sun's caress on my skin, taste of evenings, honeyed amber on my tongue. As the days grow shorter and quieter, now the swallows have left the sky. I wrap myself in summer's fading light and wait for autumn's touch to turn green into gold. My heart grows colder in anticipation of winter's bite, when I am devoured by the long December nights, and no fire can warm my bones. I am a child of September. My soul floats with dying leaves in a cascade of spiraling embers. But who will catch me when I fall? That's the
That was
piece.
beautiful.
And the last line I'll read again. My soul, I'm a child of September. My soul floats with the dying leaves in a cascade of spiraling embers. But who will catch me when I fall? Such a beautiful reference to autumn and the spiraling embers, red leaves. Like, and who will catch me when I fall? Such a powerful line.
I love the way she actually made herself a part of the changes that were happening of actually leaves falling down during autumn, and like how she is now one of those leaves and she's falling down. And it's absolutely wonderful, and I can associate it as well as Kayla because I am a child of
Exactly.
September as well. Okay, so this poetry is by the Poetry Windmill. While autumn's peeping through the door to spread the maples on the floor, scorning summer to merge with rain, O September, come again. And drenched in the rain's aftermath, the sunrays have now lost their wrath. Winter is yet to board the train. O September, come again. The half-pledged vows which froze on lips Lovers made between blooming cowslips, the unsung songs which still remain. O September, come again. The mist now hovers upon the moor, dew-dappled mornings to procure, with the brooks that hum a beknown strain. O September, come again. And I really love the ode that she had made to September, where it's explaining all the changes and everything that's gonna happen, the whole process that's gonna happen during September, and at the same time you have this lingering feeling of melancholy, like, oh, September's going away, and please come back for all of these things, and especially the lines where it was the unsung songs by birds that will just remain like that, because like they are all going to go into hibernation, or they are all going to migrate into much warmer places, and you're no longer going to hear those songs. And sometimes you feel like just a little bit more, maybe you should have sung a little bit more, and that it's just silence after this. Even the way in which promises are made between lovers on in the summer period, it's the time of love, like summer spring is the time of love, and you slowly see that feeling receding away during the winters, where everything is then just like it's getting colder now, it's getting dreadful and melancholic now. And that's why I love the way that she's just calling on to September to continue staying and continue having this last moment of lingering. And then at the same time, the last para where she talks about how the mist hovers over the moor, and then you have this dew-dappled mornings. Even while we talk about the change between summer into autumn and winter, September in itself has this whole particular season that is just, highlighted by dew in the morning, a little bit of cold bite to the air, and like things slowly falling asleep, losing their color, changing colors, and turning into a really brilliant and beautiful world. So
Yeah.
that's something that I really loved.
Yeah, and I also like the way she's written. Like when I'm reading like poetry by the Poetry Windmill, always has this very like romantic nature essence, which is very very Wordsworth like, very John Keats like, and gets us there into that dreamlike world. So I'll be going ahead and I'll be reading a poem by somebody called Joe J. Oliver. So it's Julie Oliver, who I think I remember she wrote this poem on the 1st of September last year. And it was when I read her poem that I felt like maybe why not do a prompt where I ask other people also to write poetry. So basically, her poem was an inspiration
She's
for
the
the prompt.
starter.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's called September. The trees have grown heavy with fruit, splitting their skins, offering tender flesh, and the breeze turns aromatic, falls crisp with wine resin on its tongue. The starlings are beginning to murmur, in mesmerizing dance over orchards and hummingbirds to plump with nectar, sustaining them on their journey home. The sandhill cranes will soon arrive, soaring over mountain peaks, settling in valleys as woolly caterpillars trek across roads to their beds on the other side. It is September, and the blood orange season of abundance, ripe for the taking, and the pregnant listening for internal signals curling warm before the hearth. And so we fall, we rise, we dance in the primordial way of it, swaying close in unison, flowing with the rhythm, leaning into one. Yeah, so the poem starts like again, it's the transition is very much there from summer. She's talking also, I love the reference where she's talking about September as a blood orange season of abundance, ripe for taking, and the pregnant listening for internal signals, curling warm before the heart. The amber reference, the red, the crimson reference, the colors of fall that she's talking about. And her first line, especially where she's saying the trees have grown heavy with fruit, like that, like the late summer reference, the peak of summer has been reached, the trees are heavy with fruit, and then the starlings will start to murmur because they'll have to, they'll have abundance of fruit, but at the same time they'll have to start with the hibernation process, right? So the transition that is there, and with via this poem, it's like I started to look like September was a normal month, and then I read this poem, and then oh wow, September can be poetic. it has so much in, in it, like a whole package of so much change happening, and change has so much to offer, right? And then I felt like, yes, this month can be poetic, and then I just started the prompt, and so many poets wrote about it.
For me, like it is the line where she talks about the caterpillars going back to its home. It's absolutely perfect because right now in India, it's the time for butterflies to be all around you, for caterpillars to be all around you. So it perfectly symbolizes the changes that are happening in nature itself. It's not just limited to birds stopping singing, but also so many other creatures that, kind of see this change that is happening throughout the seasons and especially in September itself. So that was awesome. So this next poem is by Rosa G. Words, September. 7 harvest fields before I cross into autumn. Sept. Morning mist floats over earth grown waves, hushed and golden, burnt like embers of fires lit from August bloom. Ember, a rustling glow caught by trees, where leaves flicker into flame, dancing until breaking and falling, a whimsy of color which flutter to catch its breath and stop before landing. September, autumn's doorway, graced with a honeyed sun and fire-sipping bees. The way she has used the colors and also the slight changes with leaves that are happening throughout this month is absolutely beautiful. And you see this kind of recurring colors popping up of amber, golden, red, and like it's all the colors of fire, it's all the colors of brightness, it's really eye-catching colors, which is what pulls so many people to the feeling of autumn and to like just being around in nature as leaves fall down around you and there's just this smell in the air. And that's something that she beautifully signifies. And the next thing what I liked really beautifully done was the way she has split the name September into two parts. You start with Sept,
Yeah,
and it's basically mist on the ground. It's rolling grasses which have slowly lost their green tone and they've turned golden under the summer heat. And then you go to Ember, and Ember is perfectly signified and personified by the falling leaves, the changing of the leaf color from like green, you go to crimson and maple, and it's absolutely beautiful. And then you have the sun, which slowly, very slowly, is like kind of losing its hit. It's becoming less harsh. So you go from this bright yellow sun, which is what you normally speak about in summer, to a much more honeyed sun, like she says, which is
yeah.
significantly present during September time. And I really loved the way that she played with colors for this particular piece.
True. And then she mentions September's autumn's doorway, which is indeed like the gateway to autumn as well. I'll read the next poem. It's by Boski 2022, and it's an acrostic on the term September. So I'll read September as solitudes of warmth escaped moons, eclipsed into autumn soon. Peaceful meadows breed harvest yonder, tenacious, voracious, audacious wonder. Enlightening Hyrenga's color changes bloom, morning glory tell the story soon. Born in humidity, the aster signs its star, evergreen forever seen, relish autumn's charm.
So the next poem is by Quill of the Goddess.
Yeah,
September paints me gold and crimson inside as I gather the turning leaves into the pockets of my wistful heart. The bustle of summer fades like a cotton dress, and I listen to the music of distant stars in the quiet hours when the eye of the world sleeps. So it's a really tiny poem, but it also at the same time really signifies the passing and the whole vibe of the month, especially the line, the bustle of summer fades like a cotton dress. And that is so true because as cotton slowly, slowly loses its color, it's the same way, like slowly the summer colors are fading away and you're entering into winter and it's the grayness of winter that's settling in. And
yeah,
the line where she's holding on to the crimson and the gold, the feeling of, sort of happiness is what the colors signify, and joyfulness. And this is what she's holding into her like her wistful heart for the coming winters, to go through this whole dreary and, really sort of depressing sort of an event in time. And really it's cold and there's no color in the environment, and you're just holding on to this promise of like, come later on, there's going to be spring, and then there's going to be another autumn period, and it's going to get the same golden colors and the same crimson colors that are going to be coming back into your life again. And that's just, you're holding on to it with this sort of remembrance.
I'll be reading this poem by this poet called Kindle Dot Downs. So I'll read. And what is September but a series of little deaths? The leaves have begun their descent, tinged green with summery envy. The milk bottle stars speak fearfully. Over the back of the blood moon, a red heart once vexing, yet the harvest is upon us. Take the last of this field's bounty, ripe fruit and grain, store what comforts you. I will rest a while in fallow. Amongst the rotting things, sprinkle me in holy water. Pray for this malady to pass. So I remember reading this poem the first time. The first line struck me. It was like, "What is September but a series of little deaths?" Like she's talking about deaths in September, and she starts with how the leaves have begun their descent and the green is fading, and she's caught in the middle of all this as a poet, and she's like, spare me the death, spare me the decay, and why, and sprinkle me with holy water, and I mean, it's such an interesting perspective. Like we're here talking about like the beauty of the month, the change of seasons, natural world, and even though she's nature referencing nature, she's actually talking about the dark side of the month. There's a very famous poem, "The Human Seasons" by John Keats, and where
Yeah.
he's using nature, change of seasons, and the characteristics in sync with human characteristics. And here, even in that poem, like autumn is referenced as like middle age, like that we have reached summer is youth, so summer is the best time is over now. They're so slowly transitioning towards that. Like this poem also echoes that aspect even of human life, right? It's a series of little deaths.
So the next poem about the prompt September is by Sabrina's Poems.
Yeah.
September. Reminiscing and beaming about sultry summers, discovery walks, the heartfelt talks, lovers discarded, and lost career prospects flung in the lake, pleading with the sun to continue to descend its bright light upon eager eyes, to halt the drizzle and puddles of rain. As days dwindle, light apparel is exchanged for warm attire, shivering in anticipation at the looming erratic dreary winter days. Hot chocolate in one hand, the other entwined, as lovers' feet kicked aged lives' thoughts away, craving a triumph to end the year high, contriving new beginnings with an everlasting blue sky. So in this poem, there's a lot more connection between the changes that is happening throughout the month and humans, and how we as people perceive the changes in this month, and we are slowly being dreary of the coming cold, the coming rain, and there's no heat on our body. And the poet is basically asking for the heat to stay, for old promises and old prospects that were just created in the heat of summer and are slowly now being thrown away, to just like come back and continue staying with us. And that is something, that kind of sense of melancholy or nostalgia feeling that is prevalent, is what she kind of weaves into her words really beautifully. And then slowly, as you go towards the end of the poem, you have us as people waiting for winter to come in with hot chocolate in our hands, and basically
Yeah.
taking little walks around the parks as leaves are fallen on the ground. And there's a hopeful kind of feeling in the end of it. So like, whereas the previous poem ended on a much darker note. Here in this, the poet, she adds a little bit of a lot more hope and a positive light into it, where we are hoping for the year to end with a blast, for like new beginnings and new ideas to come up as the year and the months go through winter slowly and then progress into summer back again. So it's, you are left with this feeling of there is a possibility of hope on the other side as well.
Connecting a personal experience, a human experience, and using nature as a metaphor, changing seasons as a metaphor. Yeah, beautifully put and interesting. Like you said, after the dark piece that I read, this is more hopeful, and because she ends in blue skies, right? Yeah.
Yes,
So I will be reading another poem by somebody from the Southern Hemisphere. It's by Love Letters underscore Ransom Notes, Ellie Gray, and she wrote from Australia. So she's writing again using September as a metaphor for spring, and she actually talks about spring wedding. Like she's using nature as in that POV. So I'll read. From behind a cloud, spring appears, nourishing, vibrant, virescent. Ornamental pear trees line the city streets, showering confetti to celebrate the union of sun and rain. September hosts spring equinox. Everyone is invited. Bury the bones of winter, fetch the wood and stroke magic, dance throughout bluebells and onion weed and throw open the windows to bird songs and noisy crickets. Come and see, all the seeds are growing. She said that here she's like, bury the bones of winter.
yes.
We are like, growing towards winter. Here they're burying winter and seeds are growing, she said. Come and see. A beautiful invite piece.
The next poem, it's by Adana, and she goes by Adana Kaz underscore poetry. As September makes her way into the year, the weather becomes cooler in the northern hemisphere. From the autumnal equinox to the winter solstice, so many things we notice. Mother Nature becomes beautifully vibrant. She changes to flaming colors, making us silent. Life then becomes dormant as she puts on her winter garment, a season for reflection and introspection, and just living in this wonderful moment. I think as one of the ending notes, she completely combines all the features and all the characteristics of September and the change from summer into autumn, the autumnal equinox, and then slowly heading into winter, where this is the month where we actually celebrate being outside and enjoying and watching the changes that are happening in the environment around us, the blazing colors that slowly grace the planet. And at the same time, we are slowly walking towards the lot more gray skies and cold, and maybe in certain places, snow in the ground. And at the same time, something that hasn't really come across in the other poems is, and what she points out is, it is a month of reflection and introspection, where you are sitting at home maybe with your hot cup of coffee or hot chocolate, whatever the choice may be, and you reflect and you introspect over your life and your choices. And this is where, as the previous poet said, new beginnings arise, new prospects arise, it new growth happens, and this is only possible through reflection. And this season kind of starts creating that momentum and that feeling for like, yeah, we gotta now sit down and look at our life and reflect upon what we have been doing.
And I think I love the reference where she used September as a garment getting ready for winter. I have one last poem to read. It's by The Story of Green. Collecting all the fallen leaves, walking alone under the moonlit weaves, thinking about the time gone, road lined with bare trees alone, the silent night of autumn. Said, say what's in your heart unsaid, how many words live there unsaid. And like reflective of very melancholy again, like the trees are bare, the moon is saying what's unsaid in your heart. Feel like you are, after living 1 year of spring and summer, you must be filled with a lot of things as an observer, the earthling perspective where you're observing, while on a time on earth, lots of unsaid stuff. And while you're walking down the road at night under the bare trees on the moon, like the moon is asking you, the poet is reflective and introspecting and saying that what's there in your mind, what's unsaid. Let's put it out there, like, because it's the month of introspection and reflection. Yeah. And yeah, that was the poem. I actually myself wrote a poem last year for this prompt, and I'll read. September, wedged between August's late summer and October's autumnal homecoming, or a whiff of spring in the opposite. Perhaps the heat lingering in the tropics if winter came in too early in the temperate. Still a bit of everything, diverse in the planet's length and breadth. The harvest moon and the equinox, the only global assets, till nature-loving poets made her their muse. Now beyond all else, she is but poetry.
Yeah, I love how you combined it after the prompt and brought out the whole changes in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, and the way you pointed out that the equinox and the solstice are the only ones that have, continue staying there and kind of stay stable throughout the whole time period. But at the same time, it's celebrated in such different ways. There's so many diverse cultures that are linked to September itself. It makes for a perfect poem to just wrap up the entire prompt, because I feel like you have picked from every single poetry that came in and actually highlighted what they all spoke about in your piece.
I mean, before I started the prompt, I was like looking at September like a normal month. Like our lives are such that we go through every day and we hardly pay attention. But like, and then you're like, okay, it's just September. But after experiencing the poetry written for such a month, I started to look at it so differently. So much knowledge and wisdom and beauty, was like there, and all via poetry. The prompt is to write a nature poem, like based on how September makes you feel. Basically, like come together to co-create and add, like, I wouldn't say like add so value in the sense, like even if momentarily add some good vibes to or uplift our living experience, because looking at the world through poetry is looking at it differently.
That's very
Yeah.
true. Getting together the poetry community and for us to specifically write about nature poems, it's been such an amazing pleasure to be a part of the community, to see so many poets writing such amazing things about nature and how their connection and their perspectives about the different prompts that you give us. And also, thank you so much for that.
And thank you so much for your beautiful words, Clarita. And it's like I felt like there was a need for it because there's so much nature poetry and everybody writes. And I felt like why not come together? And if we come together, the value is higher, right? And have a space to just appreciate and find meaning and raise awareness at the same time. Like otherwise, we just go through life, we ignore nature. And we are poetry
That's
earthlings. The
true.
idea is to bring the focus back to nature, and when we do that, we also mindful about our relationship with the environment,
Yes.
right? Especially now more than ever. So
Yes.
thank you.